welcome on this Wednesday, day 3. We'll talk about Utro today, or how you can use Utro to create actually great user experiences. So it all kind of fits together. You've probably heard a few things about Utro. Some of you might have been in the Hackathon presentation. Some of you saw the keynote. So Jason and I are here to tease things apart or put them together for you. My name is Andrea. I run the user experience team here at Guidewire, and with me is Jason.
I'm Jason Hill. I'm the principal product manager, and I manage the Utro designers for our design system.
Yeah, and he's actually the magician behind all this stuff. So this is the reading test also for today. I know you've been deeply studying this, but some of the things we might talk about today are not product yet or are ideas. And of course, anything you say is very valuable to us, and we might use that information to improve our products. And there's probably a bunch of other stuff in here that is mutually good for us. So what we'll cover today is I want to briefly introduce you to user experience at Guidewire. Yes, we do have such a thing, and I have a team. We'll talk about some of the use cases we're designing for. It might be a little bit different what you might expect. And then we'll go into design systems, why we have them, and then of course main focus will be on the Utro design system and why it should matter to you, and why we are very excited to have you all in the audience. So as a design team, when I started here about 2.5 years ago, we were just starting the cloud journey, right? And in a way, as you know, InsuranceSuite is pretty well made, right? It has a lot of functionality. And we just started then thinking about cloud applications, right? And of course, InsuranceSuite is tried and tested and true out there, right? Many of you are using it. So when we talk about cloud experiences, the first thing actually we ended up making were experiences that are more of the what I would call configuration flavor. So if you are using, for example, our Guidewire Cloud Console, that is actually designed and made by my team together with our developers and product managers, right? So whatever we do, though, we use a few guiding principles, users first, personas, whatever you want to call them. So people like business analysts that would configure systems, right, like many of you probably are. Developers, and there's 2 flavors typically, front end, back end, sometimes full stack too, right? So very persona-based. We have we always engage with our customers, with our end users to come up with the best solution. And some of these users might be business users, and then of course we need to also put ourselves into your engagement channels, right, and say, oh, Olivia, that person that needs to buy, in this case, farm insurance, right, what will she need, right, because we need to make products that you can use to make Olivia happy. So here's some examples of the experiences we're designing, and some of you might be using them, don't know that yet, but this is the product designer UI actually, or APD, or advanced product designer might be some of the buzzwords, right? So some of you might have seen the InsuranceSuite version. This is actually the cloud version that we have developed together with the product management and engineering teams. And so you notice it's a little different theming, and it allowed us to really reconstruct the app, deconstruct and reconstruct it in a very user-friendly manner. Here's another example. If you have seen demos or maybe even are on a journey for claims autopilot, right? It's a very question-based and decision-based process, right? So this is actually the claims intake designer UI, that question library that you might have seen, and that design and that thinking behind it also comes from the UX team.
And Andrea, if I can just call out here, if you guys see, they're 2 totally different apps, 2 totally different teams, 2 totally different product managers and development teams, and because of the design system, they were able to operate independently and yet come out with 2 different applications that feel like they belong to the same platform and home.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so one other thing you probably heard a lot in this conference is micro apps or micro frontends, right? We just changed the word to micro frontends. Honestly, more or less the same thing. As a designer, I always think about these things as being experiences that get one job done really, really well, right? So in this case, it's actually a submission intake. I think Madhuri is here with an intake form, right? So an Accord intake form, and how might you automate that? So it does that job really, really well. And the beauty of these micro front ends is you can embed them. Let's say you have 10 different types of agents, right? You can embed them in 10 different type of agent experiences. And so the reuse is basically given, so you don't have to remake those same things over and over. And as Jason said, what this is here, for example, this could be an embedded application into Policy Center, right? But it's fully cloud-based, it's fully Utro-based, it's a micro front end. Or maybe you have your own agent portal. You could embed it there too. All right, so we also, of course, work extensively on figuring out digital experiences, right? So when we delivered the original digital engaged products, you probably have seen we try to give you a few reference apps. Well, a few things changed in the meantime, right? So these are probably 3, 4, 5 years old. So what I learned from my product managers is they were meant to be reference apps, so sample starter apps for you. And what we also learned from our consulting organization, oftentimes then you took those and said, well, that's not exactly how we work, right? So you kind of ripped some things out, replaced them, and all of a sudden it became a lot of very customized code that you then on top of it may be themed, right, with your brands, et cetera. And so it became very expensive, not only to make, but also to maintain. So we took those lessons and we looked at countless digital experiences from your websites, from our own consulting engagements, and we really said, well, what are the common components that these things have? I mean, not just boxes, right? Boxes are easy, text boxes, et cetera. Although there's a tooltip story out there, which is really interesting right now. So things like tooltips, they occur in every single application, right? So why put that stress on you to have to figure out, oh, here's how my tooltip should work, and code, right? I make it. So when we talk about the design system, really what our job is to make this a plug and play kind of thing for you. So when you make your digital experiences, those basics, those components that show up over and over are taken care of, so you can spend your time and your design time and your UI development time on really these value-adding experiences. And that is an example of a sample that my designers designed here. So I'm going to ask a question. I asked that yesterday. Who has a design system?
Raise your hands.
Raise your hand, please. Working on one? All right. A couple of people. It's a little hard to see with the lights. Who knows what a design system is? OK. That's good. So we'll start a little bit more with the, let's start with the design system. So imagine you do business in 16 states, and you are going to sell your auto insurance in these 16 states. And now you want your customers to buy this auto insurance. Maybe you have a companion agent, either captive or independent agent experience, right? And so what you could do is a couple of things. You could say, let's make one for state 1 and state 2 and state 3, right? So you could develop all these user experiences. You could hire an agency to do that for you, or maybe your UI developers have to be creative, which sometimes works, mostly doesn't, right? But in other words, you might have a lot of different teams creating these new experiences. Well, what inevitably happens, and it happened to us actually, it happens all the time, is each team will have a different opinion, right? So let's reuse the famous tooltip. Well, my tooltip should look like this. Oh, OK, and over here, I saw one out there that I really liked. I'll make that one, right? And that's the simpler case, right? So imagine all this time spent on making address components, on making header components, on implementing theming and taking guesswork at, that brand style guide, how do we translate this to actually our experience? So this is really what design systems are made for, because you do not want to have 3 or 4 or 5 different teams make, in essence, a very similar experience, right? It's a lot of waste of development time. Believe me, I've been there. It's a lot of effort to maintain, to code, to keep these teams coordinated, right? And so a design system really documents the one version of the truth, what a text entry box should look like, what the address component looks like. So this is a fairly recent phenomena. I did a couple of design systems in a prior life for a large enterprise company. We had embarked on that journey about 10 years ago. You might have heard about material design, maybe. This is actually Google's design system, so it's consumer-based, right? So when you build a Google app, they also don't want you to bother with making all these boxes and buttons and whatnot, right? So design systems were really invented to make things quicker. So what's in it? Bunch of assets, right? So things we would expect to see on a screen, and properties, right? So maybe you want a box that is mandatory, right? So you want to have that little asterisk thing in it, maybe, right? Well, some of you might differ. Oh, it shouldn't be an asterisk, it should be something else. Okay, so you change it, right? Or it could be a date picker, or it could be a search field, right? All these things have been invented. Whenever my designers come to me and say, oh, I need to design something for search, I said, no, you don't. You go and look at Google, they've done it for us. Thank you very much, right? So that's what a design system tries to predict. And then, of course, your brand, your product, those are the components you want to spend the time on, not on figuring out search and filters. We've done that for you. So it's not only UI design, though it's code, right? So not only do your UI designers reuse this stuff, or if you don't have any, you can reuse it, but your developers can use those UI components as well, right? So the code is written for you instead of you having to write the code. And one of the things you'll see later is actually the properties. So my designers think a lot about, what might the customer want to change? Well, maybe they want to change the tooltip location, right? Or maybe they want to have a piece of text under a field, right? So all that can be actually done by a design system. So it's really supporting designers and developers. So I'm going to throw in another ad hoc question. How many of you have a design team, like a user experience design team? Some of you, good, okay. If they're not your best friends yet, make sure they are and they understand this presentation, because we're finding they actually also are a big stakeholder in Utro. And it really has the opportunity actually to set some of the foundations of your system. So some of you might do business in Canada, right? Well, if you have an experience in Canada, you're also going to probably want a French version of that, right? Some of you might want to attract non-English speaking customers, right? How do you do that? So things like translatability, localization, translation, things like accessibility, things like security are also all good qualities of a design system. It's that non-sexy stuff that developers usually don't love to spend time with, because it's that nitpicky, you don't see anything, right? But it's so, so super important. And so all that basically comes from a design system. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jason to talk about Utro.
Thank you. And if I can add just a little bit to that, one of the things that you should be asking yourself is what differentiates our design system for other design systems. As Andrea said, it lays out a lot of foundational elements. Utro focuses on the property and casualty industry. And the main vision of Utro is to take those elements that insurance companies have been doing for 20 years, and most of you do the exact same way. Those things have become a commodity. Utro wants to make those for you so that you can use them out of the box, speed up your development time, and then focus on those bigger, hairier problems like Andrea mentioned. So it's not just a set of Lego blocks and components. It's actually a full toolkit, right? This is a site that we launched internally last year. It's available externally for customers that have licensed digital. It's a toolkit. It's a full toolkit. We talk about best practices. We talk about why we develop certain things. If there's specific research that we think is very important for you all to understand on why we made certain design decisions, we try and share that. And as the design system grows and continuously improves, we want to continue to add to this so that you get access to our research. It's not uncommon that you would find a best practice that you might want to break, because in the insurance industry, we do things a little bit different. Sometimes we focus on one area of the design system versus the other. One of the stories that I like to share is we've got a really talented design team. We could put together a design team that focuses on a payment pattern. We could spend a year doing it, and I have no doubt that we could probably come up with a payment pattern that's more delightful to use than Amazon's payment pattern. But would that help you all sell more policies? Would that help you maintain things? No, it's a pretty good payment pattern as it is. So our design system is really all about picking and choosing the right elements to focus on that it enhances that property and casualty journey. The next thing that the design system is typically composed of are components. You'll often hear these referred to as atomic level components. These are the smallest building blocks. Things like buttons, things like form fields and checkboxes, radio dials, and cards. Extensive amount of components. I think we have somewhere between 80 and 100 components now. So almost everything that you need to build your UIs. Now these are the smallest blocks. It is possible for one team to use these blocks and another team use these same blocks and still come up with minor differences in their UI, even though they're using the same blocks. So one of the things that you'll see your design system do is start to evolve into what we call a pattern library. Pattern libraries take these same atomic components and they start to put together these most often repeated patterns that you see. Again, these are the commoditized patterns like making a payment, like adding a vehicle, perhaps adding a home. You know, if you go do competitive research, you're not likely to see great differences in what those patterns look like. That's not where you guys make your competitive difference. So this is something else the design system can put together and start to do these patterns for you. It also consists of UI foundations. These are things like typography, the color grid, primary colors, what we call floor plans, which is basically our layout system that works alongside with the grid. That gives you some flexibility in how you do your layout, and it also helps you bootstrap your app together. You know, one of the things that Andrea and I always joke about, it's a design exercise that we used to do, so if any designers in the crowd, you'll understand this. When you do competitive analysis on the internet, there used to be only about 4 websites. I think there are probably 6 now. What that means is if you boil them all down and melt them down to their wireframes, they all look the same, right? You've got left nav, you've got top nav, you've got blog style, you've got information-dense websites. So there aren't a lot out there. So that's what the floor plan does, is it gives you a really good foundation to start to build up your app, and then you add your detail and your context and your nuance on top of that. And then last, but certainly not least, Utro is not just a design system for designers. It closely matches the UI framework. So there's a lot of development tooling that goes into our design system as well. So that those components that you see in the design system in tools like Sketch and Figma, which we're onboarding to, they work and are implemented the same way in our tooling. Tooling has some things like upgrade scripts, some of the formatting so that you can see the code blocks are color-coded and tabbed out to help developers see things. Lots of nice little bitty small developer tooling that you can bring the code down, work in your IDE, and speed up your development journey. Our design system also relies a lot on what we call UI metadata. You'll hear it mentioned, you heard Mike talk about it and Diego talk about it in the keynote. You'll hear us talk about it. So what's so cool about it? Well, if you find these things that you do over and over and over again, a thing that you might want to code once and then maybe configure to be slightly different, that's where metadata comes in. And it really reduces the coding effort. If you were to code from scratch and try and use metadata like a programming language, it's going to feel a little bit slower and it's going to take you a little bit more time. But in those places where we built something and want you to configure it, or you know you're going to build it once and then configure it over and over again, something like a page layout on the side, using metadata winds up saving you a lot of time on the back end of things. You can validate your presentation metadata, so a lot of the upgrade scripts will validate what you're doing. The documentation greatly reduces the learning curve once you start to use metadata. As you heard in some of the hackathon presentations that we've talked about, the learning curve is there, but once you get through it, you see the benefits to metadata pretty quickly, especially if you're looking at those configurable elements. It really helps you reuse a lot of your code. And then one of the best things about metadata is that you can make changes live to the website. You don't have to build and redeploy these sites over and over again. You're able to make changes in the metadata, save it off to that file, and then at runtime, it just rebuilds itself without a build and deploy. So it's a really handy tool, especially if you're building those configurable experiences that Andrea mentioned. So we've talked a lot about this, right? What is configuration? What is customization? This would be one of those patterns that I was talking about. Again, adding a driver is fairly standard across the US, even into the EU. You've got to add first name and last name. You've got to get some information. So this is an example of where we could build this pattern out for you. We would want you to use this pattern, and then with what we call our theming mechanism, you go in with global variables and you change that pattern to look like your UI and your brand. You do things like add the stroke color, change the background color for the form fields, maybe change up some shadows, button colors, and you've got some configuration options for things like radio dials and checkboxes as well. So rather than build out your own componentized structure each time, you just pick ours up, use the global theming, and it reduces time drastically for how quickly you can get this sort of stuff implemented. So what is it that you can do in Utro and Dobson? So this is an example of one of the apps that we built on the current version of Digital. It's all using pre-built components that you can find inside our design system. It uses metadata where it's appropriate. Again, those configurable types of experiences. All of our components are out of the box responsive, meaning that they are built to conform to multiple form factors. It's not quite the same thing as mobile first. We do have some mobile first elements, meaning that when we designed that, we thought of how it would work on a mobile device first, and then the design for the desktop followed. But most of them are at the very least responsive, which will help out. You can quickly mock up your digital user experiences. So part of digital is that we give you access to that toolkit that I talked about earlier. Part of that is a sketch file that contains all of these design elements and can help your designers bootstrap up. As I mentioned, we're moving to Figma fairly soon, so we hope to unroll that to our customers once we're fully onboarded and have everything converted. You can use the metadata like I talked about. So areas like page layout, you're able to very quickly get in, change your page layouts in your current digital app, and basically use all of this pre-built functionality to build out your apps. And again, it bootstraps the app up, and then it's packaged with a lot of value like accessibility, security, analytics, and internationalization. One of the things that I always like to point out with accessibility is that we shoot for a WCAG 2.0 version of accessibility. All of our components are accessible out of the box. With theming, you can run up to the red line on some of that, so it's always best to do a final check for accessibility on the end. Luckily, most of those accessibility red flags come along the lines of contrast. If you change your colors, maybe your blue is a lighter blue than ours, it's white text on top of it, contrast is really the thing that you want to check for. The underlying things like ARIA tags, most of the time the out-of-the-box accessibility works for you perfectly. And then most importantly, we're starting to really lay down the guardrails for what it means to stay in line and make better upgradable experiences. Still giving you the flexibility that you want in your digital experiences, especially when it comes to consumer-facing stuff, but being able to stay on the Guidewire tech stack, and most importantly, as these new versions of Utro roll out and digital roll out, like Mike said, we're at 6 months. Every 6 months, we've got a tried and true release that comes out. We're always aiming to get faster and better. Staying within these guardrails will help you upgrade your experiences in the future. So let's look at some of the things that you can design and build with Utro. These are a quick highlight. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. But these are designs from our claims hackathon. So we work with our partners, quite a few vendors that you guys know about. I won't name anybody by name. We gave them a set of standards. At the beginning of the exercise, we gave them some onboarding materials, including some learning lessons. It took a couple of days to onboard themselves. And then we gave them 5 days, was it, Andrea? To basically
7 working days.
7 working days, okay. 7 working days to design and build an app. So this is one of the apps. This is a quick claims experience where you go in, enter your account information, get to the claim. They've got custom graphics. You can see with theming that they've actually wound up making the form fields a little taller, a little wider, and with completely rounded edges. Again, that's not deep inside the code. That's basically just CSS and global variables that we give you access to. They took a pretty aggressive stance on modifying our out-of-the-box wizard, which is what you see at the top. This would be an area where you go out and you're doing a little bit of custom components yourself, which is nothing to be afraid of. We want you to be able to mix and match some custom components. What we want to move away from is that your apps are 100% custom components. We want you to use as many of the Utro out-of-the-box components and then only use those custom components where it really makes a difference. So you can say they've got a nice little flow here. They were able to do something that I would say very much does not look like the Guidewire branded app. Out-of-the-box Utro components, and the global styling that I was talking to you about. So this is another app. They call this Unstranded. There was a great story in our presentation yesterday where this was from a real-life example. The gentleman that led up the team here, it was a global team, was basically out with his family and got stranded on the car. And he had to pick up the phone and deal with that very frustrating experience of being passed off. He didn't know where the vehicle coming to help them were. He had to go through a phone tree. It's just not what you want to do when you're stranded on the side of the road. So they developed this app to very quickly be able to log in, get your claim started, and get some road help out there to you as fast as possible. So it starts off by asking about the details that are involved, select the repair shop that you want the tow truck to take it to, make sure that the location is where you think it is, also maps to where you are, and then very quickly be able to get that tow truck on the way and get help. So as you guys can see, with some very simple theming variables that we'll talk about a little bit more in the session following, I hope you guys join us for some of that, you're able to get some drastically different experiences. I think the best thing for me about seeing how the partners work through the hackathon was seeing what they had to say about Utro, right? We're always very concerned that are we giving you enough flexibility to do what you want to do? Are we giving you too much flexibility that's going to be an increased upgrade risk when we go? But the feedback was really, really positive, particularly around the learning materials. They felt like they were able to get onboarded and learn about Utro and what you could do with it and how to use it very quickly within 2 days. Lots of comments about the robustness of our component system. Our individual atomic web components were really great. It was great. They saw that there are a lot of patterns that maybe that you could use and that would have been more beneficial to them, and we were able to say, that's great. We've already got these in development, so they'll be in the next release. And then most importantly, they were really impressed with how fast they could build these out. These are apps that would typically take them, a month in a best case scenario, sometimes 3 months. And as we said, in 7 working days, they were really able to get these apps out the door. It was a great experience.
And I guess to build on that, it wasn't just the UI. They also connected them up to Claims APIs, so the new REST APIs, right? So it was really the vision of how we envision that you all will build experiences out there. And I think there's a couple of people who have actually connected with us to influence even some of the Utro baseline. I think AmFam is here. So in the early days, right, we started asking. I mean, we're UX designers, so we always want feedback, right? What would be useful? What's not so useful, right? And we clearly heard, we're not going to make all the components for you. There was a very complicated multi-driver, multi-policy element that I don't know how special that is or how useful that is to make, right? And maybe that's something you need to make, right? And that's perfectly okay. But we hope to give you at least a good baseline to get started and then get your feedback. So we constantly are trying to make this thing better. We hear a lot from our consultants. Hopefully, eventually, we'll hear from you and move the topic forward together.
Yep. So that was my quick overview of what is involved in a design system, and I will pass back to Andrea to talk about what's next.
Yeah, so now you're sitting here and saying, good, and how does it all fit together with that keynote thing on Monday, right? Was it Monday? It seems like already forever ago, that Diego showed, right, and Amy showed. So what Amy showed in the earlier part of the keynote was really what I would call our X-Engage apps on the Dobson release. So I guess we call them Engage apps, right? So on the Dobson release, meaning on the Dobson Cloud release, right? So everything we talked about, the design system, right? The learning missions that Jason showed. So everything we showed today and that Amy showed on stage is available to you as part of Dobson, right? So the digital code line is now part of our cloud code line. And one thing we realized, though, during the hackathon was that we needed to become a little bit more and we realized this even internally, a little bit more prescriptive in how apps should be built, right? Because today we're still using, let's say, the Engage Shell app, right? That has things like the view model controller, validations that go back deeply into Insurance Suite, the Edge APIs, right? So little by little, we're trying to see, well, how can we help you move this to the more modern technology stack and really take advantage of a SaaS world, right? Because SaaS applications are very, very different. I had to learn that the hard way very early on in my career. So really, how do you do that, right? So when we look at, and I see Madhuri here, next generation apps, so we're doing this too. So we are always the first user of Utro. So I will hear about it first if something doesn't work, which is good because that protects you all. My designers will say, nah, that control is not going to work. We need to change it, which is also good, right? So we're constantly using our own stuff to build these applications before it even goes out to you. But the question is just like Jason said, right? We call them design experiences. I don't know if this is the best word. I think I heard a lady in the audience saying the other day, CX, right? We're all now CX companies, customer experience companies, right? So how do we give you the power to build these customer experiences that are engaging, that are differentiating, that pull the user in, right? And this is really this third block here, the compose and assemble tab that we're envisioning right now. So that was Diego's demo, Dimitri's demo, as you saw it, right? So can I tell you exactly what's going to come as part of Elysium in that? We're actually making it as we go. So as Diego mentioned, it's very much vision, right? A few things, though, are in place, right? We have been tirelessly working on the cloud APIs, so more and more are out there, right? So the good news is you can now make these data calls. The UI and the backend don't have to be interwoven anymore, right? What we found, though, is to get really good user experience connected to data, you're going to have to look at these REST APIs carefully because they're really just a dump out of Insurance Suite, right? Which doesn't make for a good user experience. So what I like to call them actually experience APIs. So I like to think of, let's start with the experience first. What experience are we trying to create out there for our users, agents, end users? And then go look for the right data, right, the right function modules, et cetera. So this is one thing we're also trying to think, well, do we give you an SDK that pre-thinks some of that? Or what should be the best way to do it? And the other thing we're doing is we create what I call an app wrapper, really, that is cloud ready, right? So you might not recall as in the demo, but the first thing was we ended up in the cloud Guidewire console. And this is where UI developer would start and just say, make a new Utro app, right? Well, that's easier said than done because a new Utro app or new Utro micro front end needs to have certain qualities to it. For example, where does my user authentication come from? Would be a good question to determine that, right? Or what styling, so that little theming thing, right? What styling do I want to use for the app, right? Do I connect the app to Policy Center, right? So this whole orchestration is something that we haven't really done with digital yet. So this next generation of the Utro web application platform will take full advantage of the native capabilities, really, of a SaaS application. And then the micro front end or the micro front ends, think again of them as smaller chunks, right? So let's say you need to make an agent experience and an end user experience. They could have the same quote front end, right? Because they go exactly through the same step, but obviously the agent also gets to do other stuff. Or maybe you're working through affinity channels, right? If you listen to the gentleman from Buckle, that was actually amazing if you look at the whole ecosystem that might sell insurance, right? So I strongly believe that we need to give you tools that allow you to embed your insurance, especially the quote and buy flows, anywhere, right? And inherit maybe that theming and that authorization. So that's what the micro front ends do. They're tiny things that you can build. We'll need to figure it out first, and then you will be able to build that can be embedded in just about any channel. And that's really, really powerful. So we are rethinking that. I think you're on the show floor, I believe. So if you want to take a peek behind the scenes on even rethinking what a new agent experience might look like in this world, where you still can leverage your current investment, but maybe also create a independent agent experience, right, that you haven't even tackled yet. That is the idea that we slowly move you towards that new experience. And then we also know there will always be custom-built apps, right? So let's face it, if you want to do a native iOS app, my design team is too small to do an iOS design system, right? Or native Android app. Or if your product is so custom that maybe many of our components won't work, I will, and you won't break my heart, I would always, always recommend, well, there's a case-by-case decision. I mean, the trade-offs you make, typically more expensive, right? Typically, I would definitely hire a design team if you do that. Don't do that without a design team because we know things, how users behave, right? I would also make sure you have really some good UI developers out there because to do good development is hard. And then I would also be aware that you will need to figure out your own upgrade because we can't upgrade something that we don't know, right? So you might be using our APIs, but you might not be using our upgradable front ends. So you have all the options, really. That is our dream to get for you. And with that, I would open it up to questions, I think. Oh, a couple of things. So we're running actually, which is why Jason's going to run out of the room here in a second, something called Customer Influence Council. So when I got to Guidewire, people said, oh, we don't co-design with our customers. I said, well, why not? And as a design person, I get to do some crazy stuff sometimes. So I said, well, why don't we establish something called Customer Influence Councils where we invite some of you that are interested in helping us influence our design system, for example, into smaller working groups and really give us feedback, right? We have a lot of design ideas on the table. I am 100% sure some of them are good, some of them are not useful at all. And we all rather learn that earlier than later, right? That these options are what you desire or not, right? Because I don't want to make stuff that's not useful to you. So if you are interested in, I think today's session is relatively full, but ping Jason and me. We'd love to have a standing group, actually, that helps us make the design system a better thing. So we already have a few people, I think, recruited here. And then we don't just want that feedback, quite frankly, for the design system. All my designers design things for you. So if you're interested in influencing, just shoot me an email, and I can tell you what projects we have in the run. And I'm happy to do an early preview. Again, we have to watch the safe harbor statement again. It's obviously a lot of stuff on the drawing board, but without your feedback, we're not going to make the right thing. So.
Yes, we'll start doing these CIC sessions more and more regularly, so we would definitely love to hear from you if you're interested at all. The CIC session today, as Andrea mentioned, is a little bit full. It's in Bluehorn 4. But if you are very passionate and want to get in, it's likely we may have 1 or 2 no-shows. So by all means, stop by. Maybe there's a little bit of room. It is a catered lunch, and we'll eat at the beginning. And definitely reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and before we open it up to questions, so if you want to know more, I also own the documentation team. Actually, that's under my jurisdiction. So we put everything we know and we want you to know on our website. It looks very different than most of our documentation sites, as you'll see. I think Tom might be in the room too. So we have also the developer community. There are some things out on the community as well. Articles, probably this session will be posted there. So if you want to just get a sort of bird's eye view of what Utro is, I would encourage you to go there. Share that with your designers, with your UI developers. They might have more questions, and we would encourage those. Okay. All right. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, but I know lunch is also waiting, I believe. So I will let you go. If you have any questions, email us, get in contact with us, and thank you for attending.